Welcome back to the Brennan Page. I'm Dwayne Page.
And this is Kyle Brennan. Tonight we have the luxury of speaking with Sean O'Neill. Again, he is our first recurring episode guest. I guess we'll call it that.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the only thing I'll say before Dwayne takes it over is that if during this discussion, if you want to get to know more about Sean and his backstory, go back and listen to episode 7. But Dwayne, I know we wanted to get Sean on a bit urgent in our desire to get him on just because the playoff season is approaching for college and high school, and we wanted to get his take on a few things. So that was the main topic of discussion today. But of course, we branched off into some other stuff.
Yeah, I think you described it perfectly there, Kyle. It's the ideal time of the year to have Sean on again. Like you mentioned, we have had him on once before, and I'm grateful for Sean taking the time to chat with us again on another episode. But I also think it's important for us to call attention to the mental performance and mindfulness side of the game. And I think that'll be a theme moving forward because I know we'll definitely have Sean on again in the future for a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time, maybe even. But whether you're somebody who has taken some steps in the direction of mindfulness and mental performance, or this is one of the first times you're hearing about it, Sean definitely shed some good light on these topics. And myself, and I know Kyle can probably echo this as well, I'm somebody who definitely encourages our athletes and just people in general to invest some time out of their day to improve their mental performance and mindfulness in general. But thanks again, Sean. It was a pleasure having you on again, brother.
Yeah, they're dropping metal and like paper clips and stuff, so their computers blow up.
What?
Oh, like it's school,
Yeah.
so then they don't have to do work.
Hmm.
Wow.
Are teachers doing this also?
No, we just throw them out the window.
The office employees everywhere are just
User error.
just spend a day with IT getting a new one. Don't have to
Yeah,
do
my
anything.
brother's got to be losing his mind because that's what my brother does. He works in IT for a school district.
Oh, God bless
He's
them.
like, he's like, I can't tell you how many times I walk into a classroom and it's some user error thing, and then he's like, all right, it's fixed, and they're like, oh my God, how'd you do that?
That's
Yeah.
So yeah, you are the first repeat guest. You were the first guest with no T in your name.
hmm
I don't know how you noticed that.
I listen to all the podcasts,
He
and
notices the little things.
I notice. I
really
zone
does.
in. That's my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We appreciate you being the first recurring guest. I mean, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
I'm honored, and I'm a fan. I really have listened to all the episodes, and I do pick up little cool ideas from everyone, and it's cool. I like to put us all in one room together and just watch the chaos begin.
Controlled chaos. That's how this morning felt for us. We had an 11 a.m. Kids Day. So the kids are still in school. So on once, maybe twice a month on a homestand, we will do a Wednesday 11 a.m. game. And there were less today, but we did this 2 weeks ago. No, last week. And we had like 4,000 people. And probably 3,200 of them were children in school. Um, so it was cool. They were playing like the Magic School Bus up on the scoreboard, and they had like math trivia questions and like are you smarter than a fifth grader stuff pop up. And they play like in between innings instead of like playing whatever ballpark music. They were playing like some different things from like kid shows or little YouTube videos that they've all seen, and the kids are all singing along.
Was Baby
But
Shark
anyways, the
going?
point. Yeah, that we heard that at least 3 times today.
Baby shark.
Yep. And and then but the controlled chaos part was just before the game. It's like everyone's trying to sleep in as much as they can, but also like do something to get ready for the game. And the game's at 11, so it was like us running around. It felt
Yeah.
very like high school, hitting the cages in and out, like trying to know who's going where. Uh, it was like not not a very zen-like environment, but it made me think of you.
It's good. The getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Embrace the chaos.
Yeah, I think I'm sure a bunch of minor league teams do that because I'm pretty sure my sister took her class to like a Yankees minor league game recently, and she was super pumped, and she was like, it was the freaking best day ever. The kids had so much fun, so I'm sure from their perspective, it's a really good time. She was gonna have me on like a Zoom call the day before because she talks about how like she talks about her family a lot in class, and I've become a classroom celebrity for her and her kids because I'm the baseball guy, so they're always asking questions, and she wanted to have me on a Zoom call and have them like ask me baseball questions, but wound up not happening. But she said she's gonna send me over a video message with them asking questions, and I'm going to send in a video response answering these kids' questions, which I'm actually super excited to do.
That'll
You
be
have to
cool.
plug the pod in every answer.
Oh, you know I'm gonna plug the pod, dude. Listen, I know you're a bunch of fourth graders would freaking get on Spotify and listen to the podcast. Tell your parents to listen to the podcast, please.
Totally age appropriate, teacher sponsored and certified.
There we go. Yeah, we got your blessing. Now we're good.
Exactly.
Except for sometimes when I go off the rails and Tom's giving me a look like.
Yeah. So Sean, you speaking of class, how your students doing? How's your class environment been going?
It's May. It's May. We're in the grind. This is August for your baseball season, where it's just
You're in the end game now.
yeah, we're getting ready for the playoffs. It's things are getting a little bit antsy. Senioritis is kicking in. You know, some students about to be optioned to the minor leagues again for next year. Others are looking to get promoted to the show. And yeah, a lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts.
Especially doesn't help when the weather starts to get good and they're just like,
Oh yeah.
class or be outside right now.
Yeah. And trust me, I'm like, let's go outside. Fire drill.
What's that like? Because from my perspective as a student, it's the weather gets nice and I don't want to be in there. From a teacher's perspective, obviously, like you kind of just alluded to that a little bit. I mean, you can't really blame them, right?
No, we understand. And that's where I always tell the young teachers, this is where you got to be committed. Like you can't give them a day off. You can't give them an inch because they're going to take a mile. It's the absolute worst thing could be is at the end of the year and they're sitting down to take the test and you go, "Oh crap, I didn't cover that." Like this is the this is where you got to be really really committed. The motivation is low. Motivation is very low, but you have to be committed to your process and what you're doing, and you hope that your students, you've built a strong enough relationship with them that they'll kind of tolerate your crap for this little bit of moment. And that all your podcasts you guys talk about in coaching, building that trust. This is where if you've built that trust, they'll they'll acknowledge it more. And if you haven't built that trust, those kids are literally waving to you as they head out the door.
Yeah, it's like they'll kind of hang with you a little bit better through
Mm-hmm.
those more like troubling and testing times.
Yeah.
I'm curious that concept. It just made me think of where, as you get to the back end of the season, you start to get towards the end. There are certain things that you'll pull back on as a coach, usually physically. You
Mm-hmm.
just total time there, the amount of reps you're doing. You might not be taking as many swings, or you might not be working on, sprinting after a ball and cussing relays for a half hour towards the end of the season, um, because you're trying to keep guys fresh. But to your point, like you also have to be consistent, um, and stubborn in a way in the things that matter, Because if you start, it's like, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. Then when you ask to bring it back in, it's like, what are we doing this? Like, we don't do this anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm curious that idea of sort of deloading and pulling back what we would say like volume a little bit. Is that a thing in school, or is it like, hey, we got ready for tests and you just kind of keep going? What's that like?
So, if you would have asked me this question 10 years ago before I learned about mental performance, I'd probably give you a very different answer. Now I'm using every mental performance trick I can possibly use. So today it was a conversation about every behavior that you have is a vote to the person that you want to be in June. So, like, when it comes to test day, what vote are you putting in? Are you doing your work? Are you paying attention? Or are you putting your head down because you're tired? Or are you looking at your cell phone? Every behavior that you are making is a choice or a vote for the results that you want. And sometimes they're not aware of that. Like, they're building something. They don't necessarily think of it. There's that story about the carpenter, the bricklayers, and they go and they ask this one guy, like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm just laying bricks. And then they go to the second person and they're like, well, you describe you're doing, and like, I am building this wall that's going to be this church. And then you go to the third guy and ask him, and he's like, I'm building a cathedral that will reach God and will be here forever and ever and ever. And it's kind of, they're all doing the exact same task, but what perspective do they have on it? Are you just going through the motions, or are you really building something special in your life? And sometimes you have to be aware and tell them, like, hey, are you just dropping bricks right now? Or, do you want to build something special? And some kids will tell you, like, listen, I just want to be done with this. Like, they're going to be the bricklayer. And others have more loftier goals. They're looking at college and careers and stuff like that. So I think it's just trying to show them the choices that they have. Like, on your last podcast, you guys were talking about sacrifices that you make. And when you think of it, sacrifice, it's kind of putting the power into someone else. But when we look at it, like, no, these are choices that we make. This is a choice that I'm making to get the extra reps or take an extra infield. And then when the day comes, and I always tell the kids, the day of the test, the question that I ask myself is, did I do everything in my power to prepare you? And if the answer is yes, I'm okay no matter what happens. But if the answer is no, that's going to eat at me forever. So,
I think
yeah.
that's a good way of describing it too, in the sacrifice versus choice, because I feel even saying the word sacrifice kind of puts like a weird feeling. I think you described it better than me, just saying a weird feeling in it. But when I say sacrifice versus a choice, and I like the way I forget the way you said it, but when you described making decisions for that test day in the future, how was it that
Vote.
you described? Yeah, the vote. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. It's definitely hard. And when you were describing the classroom setting too, I thought about like during batting practice with the base running, like base running during rounds of BP. That's one of the things. That's one of the two things that immediately came to mind. That and doing conditioning like in the fall, where once the conditioning's not there at the end of one of those practices, then it's going to be sort of an expectation that, oh, maybe today's the day that we just don't do it, instead of on a normal day, all right, we got practice done, now we're gonna get to work and get our conditioning in. And the same thing goes to the base running. I caught us probably around, I want to say mid-season, just watching BP and seeing some reads being kind of crappy out on the bases, and like seeing guys trying to go first to third on like a line drive to the shortstop, whereas we should be reading that a little bit better. Um, and then we talked with the other coaches about it. We were able to get ahead of it, and then we steered the ship in the right direction in regards to that. But we have moments like that as coaches or as leaders of whomever, where you see some certain behavior, but my first thought wasn't let's just get on them right now. My first thought was, how long have we not been enforcing this to the point where I'll say, if I say something, is it going to have an effect? You know what I mean? Like if I call out one of our starting nine for taking a crappy read out on the bases right now, like how's he going to respond? Because I'm not aware in that moment for how long we've kind of allowed the base running to not be optimal, so to speak. But we kind of instead took it as a team approach where we're talking about it after practice. Actually, it might have even been after a loss. We were just talking about how things need to be better, and that was one of the things that came up. And since then, it's been a heck of a lot better, which is good.
Sean, how much do you think, I guess that balance of maintaining a high standard and something you talk about all the time is like above the line behaviors and below the line behaviors. How much of that is in the context of sports or even in your classroom? Is it getting on guys when they start to slip below versus like hey, come on? And how much of it is just motivating them to stay above the line? And maybe first explain that concept because I don't know if we've talked about that yet.
So it comes from Urban Meyer, um, Ohio State football coach, and he talks about championship behaviors. And he sits down with his players and his coaches and lists the behaviors that champions do in order to stay at that level. So, like base running, it would be, get a great secondary, read the ball, all of those things. And then the below the line is kind of not getting a secondary, or, not watching the ball off the bat, or not seeing where the defense is before the pitch is even thrown. So you kind of establish with your players or with your students what behaviors will lead you to be successful and what behaviors will not. And the first part of it is the awareness. Like, I am sure that there are a lot of guys that are not aware that they're not good base runners, because in high school you can get away with it. And it's not really something that's emphasized too much in high school. When you guys were talking about that on the podcast the other day, I was like driving in the car cringing, because those are the littlest things that make a world of difference. So first thing is you have to be aware of what those behaviors are, what they look like. Make sure your athletes are on the same page. I always tell coaches, your team may not want to win. And they're like, what? I'm like, you have kids that are just happy to be here. It's something to do. They're hanging out with their friends. It's not about winning for them. So you have to understand the culture of your program. And you talk about at St. Joe's, you guys have a very defined culture and expectations. And then it doesn't really come down to motivating them too much. It's kind of just like, are you above the line or are you below the line? It's teaching them to reflect. Motivation is so fleeting. Like it used to be coach scared the crap out of you, and that would just be motivation enough to be right on the base path. But that doesn't work anymore. They're kind of like, yeah, whatever.
I think that's
So
actually like I just wanted to hit on that, especially like coming from many programs, because whether it was travel ball, high school, or both college programs that I was at, and now as a coach, I feel like I've always been part of that winning culture or just that expectation to win. But even, and I've talked about this with Caputo many times, and Elliot and Phil, where you have a culture that has the expectation of winning and even has the blueprint for it. And they might even have some returning players too, but we still have exactly what you just said. Conversations early on into the season, do they want it, or is it us that wants it more than them? You know what I mean? Like, we still deal with that. It's such an that's I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's such an interesting concept. Sometimes coaches don't catch that because their motivation is there. They want to win, but then the players, I don't know, like, is it a loss of touch with the pulse of their players, or you think maybe they're just their desire to win and is so high that they don't notice that their players aren't on that same level? Maybe it's the awareness of that line that you described when talking about Coach Meyer.
Yeah, I think it's very unique for each sport. There's differences between the males that I work with and the females that I work with. And I have had female athletes on a Division 1 level when we talk about, like, what does it look like to be ideal at a champion at your position? And they can describe it. They know exactly what it is. But then there's I don't want to make a teammate feel bad. Like, in female sports, there, from my experiences, there is a real, I have to make the group happy. And if I stand out in my performance, that may not make the group happy. So I'll kind of hold back a lot, which I never ever experienced coaching males, but it was eye opening. It was such a cool learning experience as to, okay, there's other components here, not just working hard. There's fitting in. And I think if coaches actually sat with their athletes and did this, you know, above the line, below the line behaviors, you would stop a lot of the side comments, like the try hard. Like, that amazes me that that's an insult. Like, oh, they're just being a try hard. It's like, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But I think coaches can do a really good job setting those lines for their athletes.
I feel
And
like those conversations are needed now more than ever. You know, I wouldn't say that we deal with coaching males. I wouldn't say that we necessarily deal with what you described with your female athletes. And I remember you talking about that last time you were on, which is, like you said, such an interesting concept. But I've noticed that in regards to upholding standards, whereas maybe 10 years ago, if you're not doing something a certain way, an upperclassman or one of your teammates can be like, dude, like, we don't do things like that. There's a concern for having a conversation like that because they don't want to be disliked by that person.
Mhm.
You know, I say this a lot with other coaches and players that I've noticed, and again, because I coach male athletes, there is such a concern for that wanting to be liked is so present nowadays. And listen, I, even as a player and even as a kid growing up, like, I would prefer to be liked by my peers, I think, like most people. But there came a point where I deemed something as unacceptable and I needed to communicate that to somebody. And I think there was a mutual understanding that we're having this conversation for a reason. Like, there's a respect there, and there might be a certain tone to this conversation, but, like, I'm here to try to help us help the team. And we've had conversations with our players like that, meaning we've talked to the group as a whole, explaining this whole concept, but the idea that, hey, if somebody's approaching you with some sort of advice or something, we have to understand that they're trying to be productive in this conversation. They're trying to help you along for, like, a bigger picture type thing. So I just think that that's so interesting. It's such an interesting dynamic of a team.
Yeah, it's the difference between constructive criticism and taking it to get better, and you're criticizing me as a person. And some players, everything is personal. You're attacking me as a person, whereas opposed to, no, I'm just trying to help you get better. So that's a perspective thing. And I think for college coaches, it's probably very hard to recruit the right guys for your program because you get one or two in there that are not on the same page, it can get ugly quick.
Sean, I keep thinking as you're going through this of the player's awareness, player, teammate, or whoever, someone's awareness for what the goals are or what's expected of them, or what we're striving for. And are those messages, do you think, better delivered in a group so that, hey, the team needs to understand that this is what we need to do and let me tell it in front of all of them? Or is it more impactful to have those kinds of conversations one-on-one or two-on-one multiple times, but a little bit more intimate?
Oof. That's a timing issue. How much time do you have with your team? I think it's first probably done better as a group, and then like a strategy at the end of practice. Go, hey, Tommy. See, I picked a name with a T because they're all in there. Tommy, can you give me an example of one of your teammates being above the line today? So Tommy's not bragging about himself, but he's supporting a teammate in it. Okay. And you do that enough times, and then if an athlete's going below the line, you have that conversation individually. Like when your first base coach, you go, hey, on that last pitch, was that secondary above the line or below the line? That's it. Just make them aware of it. I don't think you have to necessarily pull them into individual conferences unless it's just a repetitive behavior that doesn't seem to be going away.
Yeah, I
Then
found
there's
that those individual conversations can almost be like useless to use like a pretty simple word. I like the idea of having like a smaller group meeting though. That kind I like that. I've definitely seen effect with those kinds of things, whether it's a mixture of upper and underclassmen or maybe a group of quote unquote leaders on a team, whether it's at college, high school, or travel baseball. But I definitely think that individual meetings, not that they're bad, because I do think, like you said, there is a time and place for those, and I think timing is probably the biggest concern when having those kinds of conversations. Like I just kind of described that earlier with the whole base running thing. Is that's the first thing that goes into my mind. Like, is this the right time to talk about this? You know?
and it's also not only timing but location. So you say to someone, "Hey, um, stop by coach's office." They immediately get kind of defensive. It's like you, for me, stop by the principal's office. I've been teaching for 27 years. They say come to the principal's office. I immediately think something bad is happening. Nothing bad has ever happened when I've gone to the principal's office, but that 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 judgment, what could go wrong? What if I did something? Um, and for the college players, I'm sure that's very relevant. And the Division 1 guys that I work with, those conversations are not turning out well. With the roster cuts and things like that, there are a lot of guys that it's like they like in the movie Major League, you get the little tag. They know that that call is going in, and there's a good chance they're going to that coach's room and they're being told you didn't make the roster, and you know and to go to the transfer portal, and that's got to be terrifying. So if you, as a coaching staff, you can establish that these conversations are normal that we have, and not necessarily something to be feared, that goes a long way. I think with the culture. Um, I'm not happy with the direction Division One baseball is going. It's really just becoming an extension of Major League Baseball. Um, they're just dime a dozen. Coach leaves, players leave. This coach decides to get a better job. Okay, everybody's leaving, and it's like, well, what about school? What about your friends? And then you realize that for a lot of these athletes, school isn't school, and friends aren't friends. Friends are baseball guys that you're around, so we can replace them. And school is just happens to be a place where you play baseball. So that I think is I'll be interesting to see, Kyle, what you start to experience with that. Will the changes in college baseball lead to kind of more professional behaviors, which would probably benefit you because they'll be more attuned to handle the you're being sent down or you're being traded.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as I haven't thought of that, how the different structure with the portal and guys, getting more money and all that would affect professionalism. Um, I did, I mean, it did strike a chord when you said that, guys they're not going to school with friends, they're just playing with teammates. That made me think of summer ball, of guys I've played summer ball with that I spent the whole summer with them, but I don't keep in touch with them. Or if I ran into them, like, oh, hey, what's up? What's going on? But that would sort of be it. But my college teammates, I see every year. I'll see them in 6 weeks. I'll spend 2 or 3 of my 4 days off during the season to go hang out with them and their wives and all that. So, um, yeah. But there's an expectation that I've heard from players just like in listening that like, hey, you're a good player. Like it's obvious because you're with us in pro ball and you hit really well at this mid major. Like why didn't you go somewhere better? Is the thought process. Um, it's basically why were you still there? Um, so yeah, I wanted to think about that as far as the professionalism. I don't have any immediate thought.
It's kind of mirrored at our level too. Like we played a school where the team wasn't playing great, but they had a hitter on their team that is probably one of the better hitters in the conference, and it's like that's what everybody says. Why isn't this kid somewhere better? Why isn't this guy somewhere better? Like that happens. It's not just one time. That happens all the freaking time. And then you're seeing guys go from like a Division 3 to a Division 1 and performing, and it's working, and it kind of becomes that, well, if I'm not happy here, or I don't feel like the competition's good enough, or for a number, there's just so many reasons to leave schools now. There's so many reasons, which is, I try my best to say to parents of kids that are either getting into high school baseball, travel baseball, whatever, is try to still try to go somewhere where you're going to be developed into a good young man, because this game, it'll leave you at some point. It'll leave you. And I know that's crazy to say, but there's still such a low percentage of people become professional affiliate baseball players, and an even lower percentage become big leaguers. So that's not going to change. That's not going to go away.
Yeah, the rosters would only get smaller. The amount of teams in the minor leagues, if anything, would only get smaller. The and the colleges between summer ball and the different conferences and whatnot will just trend towards being like similar to what football is like in terms of there's not really much of or I guess the NBA too a little bit. Like there's not really a minor leagues in football. It's less skill, more physical, so you could be closer to that level physically. Um, but yeah, it's like can we have guys play against good enough competition in college? And we have enough. There's more data now at different levels where you could look and evaluate players as if you were evaluating someone in rookie ball back in the day, and then you're like, all right, well, I'll just take the guy from there, and he's already been working on X or Y, or I know what I'm getting, and then it's a more of a safe pick. I mean, that's the way it's trending.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's this is my opinion. Um, there's the perception that they'll play. College will somewhat be closer to the minor leagues because there are less minor leagues or whatever, and that player is somehow more ready for college because they got developed more in college. Which that doesn't. I don't see that. Just with the amount of time that coaches are allowed to spend with players,
Right.
um, and also from like a maybe not a maturity, but from like a social standpoint, I feel like if you're not spending 2, 3, 4 years with some of your best friends, like there's certain experiences you miss out on. Um, from like you said, that from guys switching schools or levels, and then they come on the pro ball, and you got to have guys that have spent more time with teammates over the years through a couple of years of pro ball than they have in college because they kept switching. Um,
And you talk about the leadership void right there, because your first year with guys, you're not really calling them out with stuff above or below the line behaviors. But by year three with them, you feel very comfortable with going up and saying, hey, this isn't how we do things. This isn't going to help us win. And, will that affect the leadership role of
that's
guys?
such a good point. That wasn't why I asked it, but it when I asked before about the team message versus individual, um, Dwayne, I'll disagree with you a little bit. But I think it's more of a difference in context where I'll have meetings with our players individually at least once a week. That's just something we cycle through. They're not long. So that's already a recurring thing. And they're usually in an environment like the cages or something, or, sit down and look at the computer. It's not like, hey, come into the office. But um, because that's already frequent. And if I've noticed that if the entire group is late on a pitch or the entire group is swinging at a certain type of pitch or something, and we want to adjust, like I've presented something and be like, hey, this is important. And some of the guys would be like, oh, okay, yeah, we got to change this. And half the team won't receive that message. They'll just sort of be like, oh. And then by the time they're hitting later that day, they've forgotten it already. But if I take some of those leaders, like and the Latin players in particular, because they've been with each other since they were 16, because they're not switching. You're not unless you're traded. If we sign you at 16, you're playing with us at 21, and so they've been around each other. And the ones that have like leadership capita built up, if I can have an individual meeting with them and I get them to understand something, he'll go and he'll get on 2 or 3 guys about not doing it when I say something to them. So it has more of a it can have more of a impact uh, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I think you saying context is important too, and I wanted to be clear that most of the stuff that I'm referring to is like equipment management stuff. Like if we're having individual meetings in regards to offensive approach, then we have similar experiences to what you're describing. But if it's about, hey, can we make sure that um, we post the specific uniform that we're wearing tomorrow in the big group, not in the players group too, and then it just won't happen for a couple of weeks. Like those conversations I'm referring to, or can we not have one guy carrying the bat bag and the helmet bag and the fungos, like like that's more what I was referring to. But when we do have those offensive meetings about approach and adjustments like that, then we have similar. The only difference is we don't really have time to be meeting in an office like that. Like those conversations with individuals are happening like outside the turtle during BP with like one-on-one guys and stuff. Like we kind of have to have that stuff going on the run really because we don't have that office time.
Yeah, and that goes to my point earlier where like I'm doing those things too where you're trying to pull some guy like, hey, he's free right now behind the turtle, like let me pick his brain on something and plant a seed because I don't have time to schedule him for a one-on-one because there's 14 of them. Um, but to your point of like, I'm not having those sit down, let's go over this. Like that's not happening at college, and it's not happening at the highest level. If anything, it's happening less because there's more eyes on time you're spending. And at those levels, it's so like pressure to win now, where the amount of players, I won't name schools or people, of course, but the amount of players that have come from a big time program that everyone's heard of and has had success, and players that have been north of top 5 round pick, and you hear things like, yeah, hitting coach never really told me anything
Hmm.
because they're just riding the wave of the player, or like, I didn't really like it there, and it was too far from home, so I transferred, and then go somewhere else, and now same thing, and they're showing up, and it's like, hey, what's your plan, or like, have you looked at any of this, or what's your uh, lifting like, and this and that, and the answers you're getting back are like, oh, they have no clue. Um, and not to say anything bad on college coaches, because we have over the years we've had coaches that have also coached in college, and they've all said the same thing. It's like you just don't have time to work with guys.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
enough time, dude. Especially in the fall too. The time where you could be establishing certain routines and honestly, Sean, this is something I was thinking about earlier too. Like there's only so much time. We can't even sometimes expose that bar. We can't even really expose we can't even spend so much time bringing awareness to certain things because it's like we got 2 hours of practice right now in the fall. Like what? So we have to really be um, our approach needs to be kind of surgical with what it is that we need to hit on this day and then what we need to hit on this day. Like next year, for example, we're going to have to bring in, whether it's through transfers, freshmen, recruits, whatever, we're going to have to bring in a lot of young guys because we're graduating a good amount of guys this year. Like the approach next year is like, all right, like on this day, we really need to emphasize what BP looks like. I'm not saying that the guys here don't know what it looks like, but there's going to be such a larger volume of newer players to where we're going to have to spend, which we wouldn't have to do this year, because you can kind of rely on the amount of upperclassmen to kind of have the younger guys fall in line. But next year, there's going to have to be a day where it's like, hey, when you get to first base, this is what you're doing during batting practice. Hey, when the group ahead of you is on their third round of BP, your group comes in. Like just little things like that. The bar needs to be exposed, but we kind of need to pick which day we emphasize those kinds of things and sort of hope that guys can buy in. And don't even get me started with the whole strength and conditioning stuff. Like that's a whole other freaking conversation. And I just think that the restrictions on the time spent with these guys is my opinion. Again, of course, is I just think that it's not enough.
Yeah, you have to be very focused and very efficient with your time. So as a coaching staff, this is where you guys sit down over the summer and get, a couple of cases of beer and a barbecue and go, all right, here's the big board. What does batting practice look like for us? And you write it out, and then you narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down, condense it to one page. This is what it looks like. Okay. And when someone walks into your program, before it all starts, here's a small little pamphlet of what we do. Okay. And you don't have to be perfect with it right now, but we want you to at least understand what we expect from you. And it could be, where you spend, you know, 30 minutes one day going over this is what first base looks like. This is what we do at first base, and really drill it home, and then kind of retest them with it 2 or 3 days later. Um, and just narrow down the expectations. It's, keep it as simple as you can. I remember coaching as a volunteer on the Division 3 level, and we had the most complicated signs I have ever seen in my life. It like I have 4 college degrees, and I was like, I don't know. Like, when they were flashing the signs, and I remember saying, like, can we just simplify this? Like, guys are missing signs. It'd just be easier if we like, some of our guys weren't that bright. Let's just simplify it a little bit. But and you think about it, is it worth the 30 minutes in the fall to ensure that it doesn't happen incorrectly in the playoffs in May? And that's your cost risk, because if you sit there and go, damn it, we should have went over that, that's me saying, oh, I didn't prepare them for that one question. It's, yeah, we're gonna have to take the time to prepare them and remind them and kind of go through it. Yeah,
Yeah, I think with that, thinking about that feeling you just described, I've mentioned that to players before too. Because I had this happen a lot as a high school coach. You're dealing with, some more immature kids, and it was like a why look on their face when something was brought to their attention, meaning, you're, hey, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look right. And it's like, dude, like what? And I said to them one day, it's I don't look at what you're doing right now and say this just looks bad right now. I look at what it will become if we get to the playoffs and it looks bad and it costs us a win, or it costs us a loss, I should say. And you guys not getting what you want out of this experience, and that's upsetting to me. So and then it was a moment of, okay, like that makes sense. We don't want to we don't want that to happen. Let's spend more time on this. Let's pay more attention to these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting efficient. We have 182 school days to teach a curriculum that is not necessarily feasible for 182 days. And it's like, all right, I have to get efficient with my time. There aren't, like, yeah, the weather's beautiful. I can see the sun outside my room, but I can't stop. I have to make sure that we cover this now the right way. So when we need it, we have it.
Sorry, I tried to unmute. Dwayne, that's a good transition. So you mentioned playoffs, Dwayne, in the high school. I love when you tell it that way, because I think that's very relatable for a lot of coaches, where the anger comes from. Because when something's done wrong, like through their experience, they know that like that's going to screw us up in an important game, and we're going to lose, which is the immediate thought. But then I think the deeper thing is like, what does that mean for the group? That's something your attentions are extremely pure in that regard. It's like, what does this mean for what experience negative experience they will have, or something they're missing out on? Um, with that, Sean, as guys are headed into back end of the year, playoffs coming up for high school, college, some levels are already starting, or by the time this comes out, they've started. What are the types of things that what are the conversations like with players?
Um, I've had a lot of new phone calls lately. Um, Coaches going, all right, playoffs start in 2 weeks. We need you to come in and get them all queued up. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, this is mental performance is something we practice a little bit. You don't have your guys, hit off 50 miles an hour and then go, all right, in the playoffs, 95, let's go. Um, so a lot of it is just reframing it. The language we use. I had an athlete call me up. He's like, I need to talk to you. We have a big series coming up. Big series. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by big series? And he's like, it's like big because it was their rival. And I was like, all right, so do they make the field bigger?
They
Are
play
the
in the
base
same game.
is the base paths bigger? Is the pitcher's mound getting bigger? Is the bat getting bigger? No. The only thing that's getting bigger is the judgment you're placing on it. Derek Jeter was great for saying that he treated spring training at bats the exact same way he treated the World Series at bats. It's not bigger. It's the same game. It's the same field. I remember as a high school player graduating, getting a tryout with the Mets at Shea Stadium, and the very first ground ball I took at third base, I put about 10 rows back into the stands. And I was like, oh, there goes my career. And one of the coaches goes, you do realize this is the same size field as your high school. And that was mind blowing to me. I was like, holy crap, it really is the exact same size.
You weren't
And
just
then,
trying to show off your arm?
yeah, I wish. It was, everything was bigger. Like I thought I had to do more. I had to, and that, you know, I'm going to rise to the occasion. We never rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our training. That's that's it. The game in the fall is the same as the game in the spring. It's just if we start allowing all the other distractions to pop in our head and take our attention away, that's when we forget who we are. And so for playoff time, I kind of tell them, we all get a regular season, okay? But the playoffs, now we're playing with house money. Just, do what you do, go out, perform the best that you can, control what you can control, and they're like, well, what about the crowds? They're watching you. Like, just play. They're all going to judge you no matter what. So just play, have kind of enjoy it out there. And I think that's where the Yankees were so good at it. And maybe they got so used to it. And Houston, very much like that. We see teams that when they have been in the playoffs and the championships a lot, they're very good at down regulating the moment and controlling what they can control. And they use their breathing and all of that stuff. And then we see guys who make it bigger than it is. And now their fight or flight goes in. They get a little bit tenser at the bat. They get a little bit tenser on the mound. And now the mechanical component of it starts to fall apart. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think it's the Atlantic League that the Ducks are in. Like they have the playoff right in the middle, and whoever wins the first half of the season plays the winner of the second half of the season. That's pretty neat. I would love to, you know, pick their brains on it. And Kyle, we've talked about you guys play 6-game series. And when the first time you said that to me, I was like, "Oh, that's cool. You play like a World Series every week. Like, what a great way to train guys to make sure every at bat's important, not just the big game."
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting concept, and I've heard a bunch of different things in regards to treating at bats the same, and prepare. I find that sometimes with players that make those playoff games or playoff type atmosphere games, which could be in the form of some rivalry that you described about one of your athletes. I feel like maybe sometimes anyways their attention just isn't there with a quote unquote regular game, and then all of a sudden a playoff or a rivalry game type thing comes up and it's like, oh, all of a sudden now I'm going to lock in.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, if you're somebody who has that Derek Jeter like approach every single day, it's easy for you to just kind of play the game.
yeah. And I think the more competition you face, the harder it is to kind of just, I'm going to lock in. Like that, and that's always a question I ask. Well, if you're locking in for those games, how good could you really be if you actually locked in for all your games? Like that's commitment, that's consistency, and that's, I think that's the key to all of our performance. It's not the motivation. I'm
It
motivated to
goes
lose weight. Go get
it goes
into the gym.
it goes back to what you're saying earlier about how each one of your decisions or your actions
Mm.
is a vote towards the person you want to be in, X moment or at some point in the future. So it's like you're getting to the end of your season, whatever you've been doing up until then is kind of like you've set what the ceiling could be for the playoffs. Just highlighting the importance of having like a some sort of a process or a routine or a set of habits for um, everything from like when you show up to the field or what you eat before, sleeping before, like what conversations you will or won't have around that. Um, I think it's like keeping those in your mind during the dog days, or in the pro baseball season of like August, or sounds like May for teachers, or maybe Dwayne, I would guess like mid late April. I don't know if that's fair to say for college, but keeping that in mind so that when you get to this point, you're now like you're just rolling, you're continuing.
Yeah. And that was Pat Cantwell talked about they got to LSU and all the hoopla and the people and all that stuff, and they walked down the street and got a six pack of beer, and they just did what they always did, and I think when you're the underdog, it's probably a little bit easier. When you're expected to win, things get a little bit harder. Um, especially in championship week, then the interviews start happening, and there's more pull on your time. There's mandatory press conference, and you're still trying to do everything. So if you have established your routine, you're wasting a lot less energy. I one of my athletes is they're playing in the NCAA lacrosse championships. That's starting, and I'm like, listen, you've established all these really good habits. Trust them. We talk about players and coaches. Do you trust me? And if you trust that you've put the work in, and you trust your routine, and you trust your ability to be anti-fragile and handle this moment, you're going to be fine. You're going to do what you need to do. Where we start to panic is where we start to question what we've done. Like, did I do enough? Like, did I cover base running enough? Did I do all this? And, next thing you know, you're spending, 3 hours before a championship game having your guys base run. And then your starting shortstop pulls a hamstring. And it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell
And
did
then
I just
players
do?
can feel that the
Yeah.
panic and the rush and the pressure from the coach.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's trying to get it all together. There's an underlying, we don't have it together. I don't think
Yeah.
you guys are ready for this.
Yeah.
That gets sent.
No,
Yes.
that's an interesting point you bring up, Kyle, because that's kind of where we've been at too. It's like Cap actually said this really well, probably about a week or two ago, where he's like, we're always thinking about where these guys are at, where these guys are at, where they're at. He's like, let's just be how we feel we need to be, trust what we've done up until this point, and then just roll.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the conversations around the team lately is, we're not hosting this year. We were the 2 seeds who were playing at Merchant, but we've overcame deficits. We've come back and won games. We've had several walk-off wins. We've beat up on teams. We've lost close games. We've won close games. Like we've done everything that a good baseball team does. And we talk about Major League Baseball too. He's like, you watch a game one night between these 2 teams, they're pretty good. One team beats up on the other team, and then the next day, the team that got beat up on is beaten up on the other team. So it's just baseball sometimes, and when we're rolling into these playoffs, we're prepared. We've done everything we need to do. Let's just play the game and see what happens. Let's play the game and see what happens. Feel good about it. Play the game. See what happens.
Yeah. It's on like that micro level. When you guys give hitting instructing, you're putting that process into them. You don't get into the game and go, hey, by the way, now I want you to wiggle your pinky and point this finger and there's nothing new on game day. It's you did the work, and in their heads, if they believe they've done the work, they should feel confident. They should be ready to go. And as coaches, sometimes we we definitely get more. Did I do enough? Did I do enough? Did I do enough? Because we're in charge of a performance that we have no control over. That I think is the hardest part for coaches. Like, we're not out on the field. We're not making the plays. But have we prepared them enough to make the plays? And then they
That
make an error and we're like, damn it, we screwed that up. It's like, they made a mistake. They'll get better.
that's my line I say jokingly to Coach Elliott all the time is people talk about who we're facing and the game and everything, and I always say, well, I'm not playing today, so like, but as much as I'm just adding some levity to the situation, it's I'm not playing today. We as coaches, we've done everything for these guys. If we needed to place attention on hitting velocity, we cranked the machine up. If we needed to focus on putting the ball forward with two strikes, we did that. If we wanted to talk about something regarding base running, defense, pitching, you name it, we've done it. So, there's that. That's what's in my mind is I'm confident in the process that we've gone throughout this season and with guys who have been returning for the past couple of seasons. So I feel confident in our process, and I feel comfortable saying, like, dude, I don't play this game. I'm not going to sit there and worry about an opponent that we're facing today because, frankly, I'm not going to be in the fucking batter's box facing this guy. I'm going to trust the guys that we've been preparing to get a hit because I haven't taken a competitive at bat in like 8 or 9 years now. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. And you trust them.
Yeah, I was thinking of something similar earlier. I was like, this is so much easier to do as a coach when, yeah, like if the teams look at like Dwayne, the way you say it is like it has to look a certain way, or are there? I'm really trying to use the word process less because it's just a blanket statement, and it can
the
be
process,
taken
trust the process.
different. Right? It's a lot of times I see the process. We were actually talking about this with Fanti, who his episode will be after this, but we were talking about how like the process can be, and the process I'm using air quotes can be used as an excuse. Basically, like if you grow up in the process and you never compete and you're never battle tested, then it's just an excuse. It's like, oh, I my process was good. I did everything, and I just got my doors blown off. But it's okay because I'm feeling good in flips.
Go
Is
process
is the
yourself, brother.
is
What
is
did
the
you
way it
learn
could go,
from it?
right? Whereas if you're competing, and especially when you there's a certain result you want of like, hey, we want to beat those guys, then and there's more emotion involved. When someone fouls off your ball, you're like, ah. Whereas if you're more concerned with like, I don't necessarily have to win today. He doesn't have to hit a home run this at bat, but hey, that was a little bit better than before. Like, okay, good, we're on to something. It's a completely different.
Yeah.
Early in the regular season, in the playoffs, it's a completely different
It's it's
focus.
it's that development perspective versus the performance perspective. And hopefully you've done the development perspective well enough. Like I've talked to you about player one and player two. Player two, the art of tennis, the inner art of tennis, Galloway's book, where he talks about like player two is the one that's always evaluating us and mechanics and all of those things and kind of second guessing things. And player one is just the all out, I'm competing, F this, go. And we need both of them, but we can't pay attention to both of them at the same time. So when we get into that game, we unleash player one, and player one is the one that performs. Player two stays in the dugout. I'll go talk to you in between innings or, after the game. But yeah, those guys that like Derek Jeter, player one, every at bat in the spring. He strengthened his attention on that. He used player two. He adjusted and made all those things at the right time. But we have all seen those guys where it's like, oh no, you see it unraveling Like player two is just all up in their head, and all of
Sean, what are
them
some strategies to shift from player two to player one? Because I think someone who's always in player one and not in player two, a
will never
coach
get
can
better.
really, yeah, if they don't switch, but that's true. I hadn't thought of that. But
Yeah.
um, a coach can really help with player two, or at least
Oh yeah.
stereotypically the
Hmm.
coach can, where it's like, oh, let me do the thinking for you and all that. I think what tends to be more prevalent, maybe you disagree, but is guys that are stuck in player two that are struggling to get into one.
Hmm.
Ha-
So strategies for that.
Yeah.
Um, Number one, simplify. Player two is all about the complexities of the game. Player one is just put the barrel on the ball. It's very, very simple. Yes, yes, yes. We're not thinking about mechanics. We're not thinking about anything else other than see it hit it as a hitter. Um, I'm gonna be as aggressive as I possibly can in the zone that I want to swing in. Like that's just as simple. For pitchers, it's work down. Like just very, very simple thought. A lot of times with pitchers, because their mechanical failures are more severe than hitters. And if they're like when coaches go out and say, we want you to hit this spot, that's hard to do. Like it's really, really hard to do. Um, so if you tell them hit the zone with a strike, that's a little bit more freeing, and that allows them to compete a little bit more, as opposed to we need you to put this pitch in this spot. I was watching last night Pedro Martinez talking about how he would pitch to Aaron Judge, and they had all the numbers and stuff like that, and they made um, one of the other baseball guys stand on a crate and go, "This is Aaron Judge." So if I'm throwing a high zone strike that I throw to anyone else in the baseball world, that's belt high for Aaron Judge. So I have to like basically go up there if I'm throwing to him, throw pitches to like the the clock in the back of the backstop. That's a high strike for Aaron Judge. And he said that's one of the reasons why he's such a good hitter is because pitchers can't throw the pitches he can't hit. It's just they don't practice it enough. So um, the biggest thing, simplify it. That's narrow down your thoughts. I ask players all the time, what's your routine on deck? And they give me, I swing the heavy bat and then, this, and I go, all right, well, what about mentally? What the heck are you talking about? I go, all right, when you start putting your batting gloves on, I want you to think about the situation that's going on the field. Who's pitching, all of those things. When you walk out of the dugout into the on deck circle, player two stays behind. And all I want you to do is think about timing. Okay. And that's a little bit of player two. And then once you leave the dugout, leave the on deck circle and you're walking up, and you may have to cue yourself to like grab the barrel of the bat, player one, compete, simplify a thought. Um, Not something you can just do. It's like if somebody hears this now, like, all right, I'm going to the playoff game, and then I'm gonna player one it up there. You got to practice it. You really have to practice it and reflect on it, and once you start getting the conscious thought out of it, that's when your blood goes to the movement part of your brain, and that's where that flow comes from. And we've all been in that flow state where ball is pitched and it kind of gets bigger as it's coming in. and it slows down and we hit it and we don't feel anything and it just launches. Like that's the goal, is if we can get into that flow state. If I could tell you how to do that easily and quickly, you'd be paying me a lot of money on this call right now. But yeah, it's something that we practice.
I think this time of year especially, that's something that a coach can make a big impact on, is the types of training and the types of cues or not they're giving guys,
Mm-hmm.
the types of environments, um, where it's like getting them from that player two focus to player one. Um, that's
And if
something
we're
I've tried to do. Go ahead.
if we're coaching guys while they're in the box, we're just giving them player two. It's like, I
Yeah.
am not going to allow you to compete today. Here's player two. Worry about all these things.
Yeah. I think it's actually, I didn't bring it up for this, but that's a good point. We talked about how it's easy if the player, if they're in player one mode and we're trying to get them to improve and to tinker with stuff, the coach can easily push them into player two.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, especially in a lesson setting or in a one-on-one or whatnot. Um, but a lot of times, getting someone from player two to player one is doing a lot less,
Mm-hmm.
and it visually does not appear like coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think a lot of coaches, especially when if they're smart and they mean well, they want to keep going, and it can block the player
Yeah.
from getting back into that state.
There's a
So it's like,
we talked about the team. Like, you guys have done what you need to do. Go do it.
I think to Kyle's point, it a lot of times coaches say things to say things because it feels like coaching to them. You know, and I've said this before. I might have said this on your episode. It's on your first episode because you know you're a recurring guest and stuff. But um, but I've said to my travel teams many times, like if I just disappeared, if me and Coach Mark over there just disappeared, you guys should be able to just go and be fine because that's how it should feel like. You guys are just out there playing the game. You know, you're
You
prepared. You're ready. You've been playing this game your whole life. You know, we've spent so many times on so many different things. You've had prior success too, and for for us specifically this year, you've had prior success on this stage. So go play the game.
remember how people used to go crazy about Joe Torre? Like when
Yeah,
he's sitting, he doesn't coach anything. He doesn't do anything. Yet they win.
yeah.
Hmm. Maybe it's something we don't see. Leo Mazzoni, behind the greatest pitching staff ever, the entire game just doing this, just rocking back and forth. And we look at that because that's all we see with them. And we're like, they're not doing anything. What we don't see is the conversations they're having. We don't see what's going on in the tunnels. We don't see what's going on in the bullpens. We don't see all of the work that goes into this. We
And if
just
they
think,
behave differently, it's a disturbance. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? If they start to behave differently than that, then it's calling more attention to what it is that they're doing now, and then the players thinking, well, why is it coach? And then all of a sudden the attention's going to whatever the hell he's doing, and they're treating the situation different as well.
yeah. And then they start making excuses and start blaming things because coach got ejected from the game and now we can't. Coach gets ejected from the game, more room on the bench. It happens. Not that I've ever been ejected.
Yeah, same as a coach. Once as a
Once.
coach.
As a coach.
Nice.
Not in high school. Summer ball.
Yeah, summer ball will get you. I almost got rung.
I got rung before the game started.
Oh, nice.
oh, I've got two, both from 2021. One was like forced on purpose, just had to do it, and then once was actually earned. But um, Sean, I want to. It's so important that we spend time with players, or we set up environments where players are spending a lot of time practicing player one. It's one thing to say, "Hey, it's spring training. Hey, it's a scrimmage. It's tryout season. Whatever." in school ball or high school, whatever, and it's like I'm going to treat this like the World Series. Like, okay,
Hmm.
cool. Like that's a good thing to say,
Yeah,
and if
but
it
how do you
happens,
do it?
that's awesome. But you spend the whole off season in player two mode.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, here's my elbow, and I have this now, and this and that, and all this stuff. And I hit this one machine a couple times, and okay, um, and then season starts, and it's like, hey, you have to be in player one, and guys like don't know how to do it. They're like, I'm fine in the cage, and then in the game it doesn't transfer. I think player one practice environments of things where they just have to compete. Some things a little bit too challenging, but it's just like, okay, go. There's minimal cueing or instruction, or if it is, it's simple, like hit it that way. Um, and just letting them be in that state, I think, is, um, I want to say, a little bit lost.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is where the hippy dippy version of me comes in. Probably the best thing to do is meditation, where you actually spend a little bit of time being aware of all the player two stuff that's going on in your head. You know, where when you practice mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be sitting for 25 minutes, cross legged, stuff like that. It, I'm just going to set the intention of counting my inhales and exhales. Okay, so it's just one, one, two, two, three, three. Okay, that's the only thing that I want to set my intention on. And I want to become aware of all the other thoughts I have besides that, besides the one, one, two, two, three, three. And you will be shocked at all the different thoughts that come into your head about everything, random things, high school yearbook picture, just crazy things. Um, and then that ability to go, all right, I lost my attention. Let me bring it back to the counting. And that has been such a powerful tool for me in my life, where I was very much in player two mode my entire life. Everything. What was this person thinking? What was this? How could I do this better? How did? And now I can literally just filter down to do what I need to do. And that takes practice. Um, like I said, it could be 1 minute a day. With you, I think I started with 30 seconds. And you're like, this is crazy. I don't like it. But it does bring that calming sense to you. And you see a lot of Major League Baseball now. You see guys meditating. The NBA, LeBron James, that guy might as well put the flowing robes on, because you see him on the sideline closing his eyes and meditating. And now they're actually like constantly putting the camera on him. Kobe Bryant was very much that way, where they talk about the hurricane going on around you, being able to step in the eye whenever you want and just narrow it down. Um, it takes practice. It definitely takes practice. Um, I don't know anyone who's ever been harmed by meditation. Like, everyone who's tried it, they may not like it, but they've never been harmed by it. You know, um, if you had deep psychological trauma in your past, you may come up with some very negative thoughts, but then at least you're processing them. But for the most part, for athletes, I think mindfulness is kind of the next great performance tool. Um, I just got a paper today. They actually did a meta-analysis, big study in the NCAA, um, with different teams and how players just feel better. Like, they can process things a little bit better and they feel better. They can let things go better. And when you do that, you can perform better. And that helps you get into the player one. That ability to kind of, what was that? Kevin Costner, For the Love of the Game, Mechanism on.
Clear the mechanism. Is that what it
Yep.
was?
Yep.
Clear the mechanism.
Yeah.
Good
That was
movie.
mindfulness.
He
Yeah.
was giving us the tools. He was giving us the secret back then, and we just weren't listening.
Well, Kevin Costner was a Cal State Fullerton guy. And Ken Ravizza, who is the godfather of mental performance in sports, was a professor and researcher at Cal State Fullerton. That's where it all came from.
And I guess he was just thinking from his experience, he brought that to the movie. That's
Mm-hmm.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
He was way ahead of us. Not as good as Bull Durham, but way ahead of us.
Well, I
Either that
can,
or Kenny Powers.
Oh, yeah.
hmm, I can attest to not so much to the benefits of what it could be, because yeah, I'm just not at that level yet. But it's been a struggle for me personally this season. I had a very good meditation practice throughout the off season, and I was making a lot of progress, and I would see more. I, I would notice a thought coming in, and then I could choose if I was going to react to it or not, or I would start to react, but then very soon into that be like, oh, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm going to list a bunch of excuses right now. Between spring training and the season, it's just like there's so much going on where it's like 10 minutes spent on this is 10 minutes coming out of these other things that are also very important,
Mm-hmm.
and taking a step back. But I'll find myself, something will come up and it'll frustrate me. And I'm like, okay. And like, I'll logically be like, okay, this is something I have to handle later. Like, this is not the time to solve this problem. But like a half hour goes by and I'm like, why am I mad?
Still bothering me. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's from that. But I have
Mm-hmm.
to stop and think after I've been frustrated for a while. And that's not something that was something I got better at
Mm-hmm.
with more of the meditation work. Um, I'm reminded of something you told me early on, which was you could be like, hey, bell rings, I'm about to head back into the classroom and start my, next 40-minute block, whatever. And someone comes up to me and like drops something on me that makes it really bad. You could be like, later, and head back to your class, which is uh, the ability to do that. It's just so powerful.
It takes a lot of work. Like I said, 10 years ago, I would not be able to do that. It's just practice. And you can do it for 1 minute. Like, just when you get to the ballpark, just take 1 minute to do it and go from there. I think a lot of people struggle with it because they think I got to sit for 20 minutes and I got to listen to the Calm app and I have to do all of these things. Do 1 minute 10 times a day. You'll start building those good reps. It's not necessarily like the gym where you have to go to the overload principle to, see hypertrophy or whatever the heck it is. You can get little tiny reps in, and it does make a difference, which is kind of cool. Best app I found out there, Healthy Minds app. Shout out. Maybe they'll sponsor you guys.
No free ads.
Hey, you never know. I'm gonna pass it on to their director, so I'll pass on the podcast to them.
Yeah, we're trying out here. I got my
There you
Culture Pop hat on.
I was
We're
gonna say we
trying.
get a little sponsorship going.
Trying. I'm glad that you bring that up. I've never heard of that app.
Yeah.
I've used it. It's my favorite one. It takes a like a scientific approach. It goes back and forth between some guided stuff, but it'll explain like how this is helpful based on how the brain works or whatever. It's very logical. And then the guided meditation, it's not. They have a bunch of them, and they'll go through like different concepts, but it's not like imagine yourself in a meadow and there's a cloud. Like that stuff just makes you
And
want
now there's a
to never.
storm on the horizon.
Ooh.
Well, I'm
It's
going to go
okay.
ahead and download that app. I'm going to give it a look. I've
Yeah,
been interested to dive into something like that.
and you can pick the meditator. There's different voices. You
They
can
have
do
like a
it.
Morgan Freeman voice because I would love that.
It's pretty close. Yeah, and you set the timer. Like, do you want 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? So
They have walking ones,
yeah.
which you put me on, which I didn't do for so long, and then you could set it to active or sitting, and it's like the same
Mhm.
script, but they'll say instead of like sit down, stay upright, and whatever,
Mhm.
they'll be like, okay, keep walking now. Focus on
Your
how
right
your big
big
toe
toe.
feels or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, focus on the breeze with your hand, and like I like that because I can get outside in the morning, get light, which is super important um, for me and how I feel, and I could do that, but also get a walk and get light and not feel like I have to. I can combine things.
Yeah,
Uh,
Nice. And for myself and our listeners, that's called what? What's the name of that one?
Healthy Minds,
Healthy Minds.
and
Cool.
it's a free app.
It's free, even better. Yeah, I'll have to give
Hmm.
that a shot. I'm so glad that there's so much more attention to mindfulness as a whole in people's everyday lives and in particular for us, in athletics because in the exposure to some methods of mindfulness that I've used personally, it is really an enhancer, like you said, Sean. So it's and I actually witnessed a couple players doing some forms of meditation in the middle of a game
Cool.
this year. So it's I forget what it was, but I think he was like in the hole or something, and he's sitting near the edge of the dugout, and he just has his eye closed. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm meditating right now." I was like, "Okay, all right, carry on." So
Getting my
it's
internal awareness.
yeah, yeah. So it's just nice to see. I'm glad that there are coaches that encourage it. I'm glad that there are people talking about it and kids and parents seeking these types of things out because I do think it's so important. It's such a good enhancement to the game and for life too because these are
Yeah.
things, also skills that one of my biggest criticism of the education system as a whole is not teaching skills that apply to life. And I think that as educators and as coaches and just leaders in general, helping acquire skills for the game that they're trying to be, effective in and in the classroom and in life, I think that's a skill that can, translate.
That's the first thing I say at every catcher metric. Shut up, Tom Downey. Um,
Another
is
T.
Yeah, another T. I always ask the players, I'm a teacher, and we always say things like calm down and pay attention. But very few of us actually teach strategies on how to calm down and strategies on how to pay attention. And it's like, no wonder why the kids are all confused. Because they're like, hey, calm down. How? Like,
And the tone that they're saying calm down
yes.
in, is not calm.
And coaches, we do it. Hey, focus up. How?
And focus on what?
Yeah,
Like
you're
now I'm
talking to
focused
me,
on you.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a skill set. It definitely is learnable. It's practicable, which is, I don't even know if that's a word, but it's something that we can all do, and it doesn't require fancy equipment. It doesn't require, you know, coaches really. It's helpful if the coaches do it, and that's one of the big things with mental performance coaches. If you're gonna have a mental performance coach come to your team, please stay in the meeting and please take notes and see what can work for your team and use it. Um, I'm amazed by the amount of college athletes who their mental performance person shows up twice a season, and the coaches just take off. Like they're like, we had this really great session, and they taught us mindfulness, and we taught us how to breathe and relax and focus and how to. There was one. thing I was thinking of you, Dwayne, about is they were talking about the code of armor, the mental performance code of armor, and it's confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. That idea of code of armor. And then, the next thing you know, coach comes into practice and he's telling us about how bad we suck and all the horrible things so that all those that optimism, like you're gonna get the hell kicked out of you in the next series, all, everything that the mental performance coach taught them was literally just, you might as well just gone in and browbeated every kid. Like, you suck, I
Yeah,
hate you.
it was
Yeah,
starting to be dismantled the second that the coach, didn't stick around.
yeah, because
Because
they
there's not an emphasis on it. It's not important enough for my coach to stick around and watch.
I've had athletes tell me that their coaches go, you guys have to go to the mental performance person once a year. You have to go once a year. Don't skip school. Don't skip practice. Go on your own time. And it's like, oh, way to, you know, sell the importance of it. It's like it's saying, oh, you sprained your ankle, go to the trainer, you know, as long as it's not here and as long as it's not interfering with us, go somewhere.
Yeah, and as long as they don't shut you down, as long as they don't, all that
Yeah.
stuff. It's yeah.
So it's getting there though. It's getting better. I did pick up some clients from my last meeting, my last podcast. So, marketing, summer's coming. I tell them all, I go, the off season is the best time to do this. And I've already
Yeah.
started booking for the summer. So
And the summer too, because it might not be the off season, but there's so
it's
much free
different.
time.
Yeah. I have some athletes that are on the summer world tour. Like they're all over the United States. They're playing 900 games in Texas and New Mexico and Seattle and all of that stuff. And I was like, all right, what do you do when you're in the hotel? I'm like, nothing. I sit. I'm like, okay, so give me your schedule. When you're going to be in the hotel, we'll block 30 minutes and we'll get that in. So make some good use of your time.
I think it's good for a number of things. Like we talked about how going into playoffs, going into this part of the year for high school baseball, high school athletics, college athletics, whatever it may be, um, if you jump into the mindfulness at this moment because you're about to be playing in a playoff game, maybe not useful. Probably won't hurt you,
Yeah,
but
no, it
it's
won't hurt.
no, it won't hurt you. But I also like the idea for coaches as well that you might see because of the lack of mindfulness and because of some athletes treating situations differently, maybe it's something to throw into the routine, and it's probably good for the athletes you'll be getting over the summer to have some of those experience very freshly in their brains so we can kind of start building towards having those moments feel like another game, having the like being able to play freely in those moments. And then for coaches moving into the fall for colleges or even high school athletics, all right, how are we going to start to stack good days in the mindfulness realm so that when we get to those moments as a team, that culture is inclusive of these practices. So I think it's, as much as it's good to talk about these things to help moving into the playoffs, it's also a good thing to really call attention to for how can we structure our preparation around some mindfulness and bringing that into routine.
Yeah, and we talked about that above the line behavior. You could make that 3 minutes part of your pre warm up. Like, we get the equipment out by this time, we're going to do this for 3 minutes. And it just becomes part of everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say earlier that the best approach is integration, meaning that the things that the mental performance coach or things if someone's working with you, they'd work on, or something that someone's found on their own is tied into other stuff. These conversations are coach to player. Um, Players feel safe to talk about these things eventually with each other. And then like it's certainly not taboo. And then to your point earlier, the consistency goes a long way as I'm learning, or it's being I'm just being made aware
Reminded
of
of.
it. Is Yeah, reminded of like, if okay, if this needs to happen, like if we tell them, if we do it once or twice, if they know why it's important, if it's not something we do all the time, every time, then like it's gonna fade off. But if we do it all the time, every time, even if it's something they don't like, they will.
Eventually it
Um,
becomes part of them.
yeah, and then when you don't do it, they're like, "Wait, we're not doing this today." They're
Yeah,
almost like ticked about it.
and you feel
So
weird.
I Yep. So to integrate, um, this sort of, and for the people listening, frankly, when I have conversations with Sean, they're a lot like this, same style, at least for me. And then we talk about ways to integrate things for myself, of how to have conversations like this for players, or hey, like I'm having trouble with guys focusing on a certain thing, and this is what we talk about. So you're getting the full experience here.
I'm gonna share you a funny story that I had with a high school athlete. So I worked with one kid last year on a team, and it worked well, and he was able to kind of start establishing a routine. And then this year, I worked with a different kid on the same team, and I kind of said, do you talk to so and so on your team? And they're like, yeah, we're there, but we don't really chat too often. And I was like, okay, well, that's a client of mine. So what I'm teaching you, I've taught them. So you can, ask questions. And the second kid started to notice things that I was teaching him that the first kid was doing, and he had never noticed it before. And then the two of them started this conversation of, did Sean talk to you about this? And what do you think about? And they started having this conversation, and then the conversation started spreading amongst their little circle. So now there's probably 5 to 6 kids that are doing strategies that I taught the two, and it's benefiting the group. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to take what I teach you and share it. So it was pretty funny. And they did not have a good relationship, which I thought was interesting. They're more in tune together with their mental performance. They're still not buds, but
That's interesting. I as being somebody that enjoys a camaraderie and sharing of things that are beneficial to a group or beneficial to an individual. I do enjoy the idea that guys are, obviously the awareness was brought to them by you, but it's nice to see that they were able to implement that strategy with other players too, because
yeah,
that the ownership of it, and realizing that, because now they see it, like that second client sees success in that first client and then is starting to recognize some behaviors. So, and listen, obviously there needs to be a trust aspect in what you're doing, but it's nice to see when somebody is taking to something that you've taken to. In this situation, it's this mental performance and mindfulness, and you see their success, and it's kind of like, all right, it helps you believe, it helps you trust that process. Sorry, Kyle. It helps you trust that a little bit more.
yeah, and it also kind of shakes the stigma a little bit. Like, it's okay to practice mindfulness. You don't have to be the bald guy in the flowing robes, chanting. It's just the normal guy on the street that's doing it. We just don't talk about it. And I admit, like, probably for 2 years, I would never tell anyone that I practice mindfulness. Because I was like, I don't even know if I'm doing it right. But now I'm like, hey, anybody, Healthy Minds app, go crazy, free plug. I know.
Free plug for a free app.
Exactly.
On a free podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, why aren't you listening to all of it? Why aren't you partaking in all of it? Like, that's my thing too. You'll spend time and money on things that just they can take away. I'm not saying that some of these things, there's things that I'm not naming, are not going to work, but you spend time and money, you invest these things in like bullshit, and then at the same time you'll spend a couple hours playing a video game, you'll spend a couple hours scrolling on the phone and all this stuff. It's like, you have the time, some of this stuff is free. Like, come on, just give it a shot. And what's the worst that can happen?
I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but I've been noticing on the high school baseball fields very odd shaped bats.
You're talking about the torpedo
bats?
ones?
Yeah, the torpedoes.
Yeah. Like, literally, it's been around, but now the Yankees use it, and now everybody fucking has a torpedo bat. Like,
I'm seeing all these high school kids with torpedo bats, and I'm like, okay, so you have a major flaw in your swing. Like,
yeah.
That's I'm like I sat through sabermetrics. They did a whole analysis of it. I sent it to Kyle, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's because you have a flaw in your swing." Like,
yes, good.
Like,
Yeah,
all right.
It's basically defense against getting jammed.
Yeah.
But
don't meditate for freaking 5 minutes. Don't do that. No, that's crazy. Spend $280 on a wooden torpedo bat that could break, but don't meditate for 30 minutes. That's crazy.
Don't work on staying calm. Work learning to get your focus.
Well, Sean, I appreciate you jumping back on.
Hey.
I know it's a weeknight for all of us, but we got to get this in. Hopefully before most are in the postseason. I think it's a good listen for everyone. We will have you back on at some point. I don't know, month or two after once summer's in full swing and it's okay. Like, what are my aspirations for the fall coming up? Whatever that means for our athletes. We'll do a check-in for where Dwayne and I are at, and yeah. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks very much, Sean.
Get a co-host title or something, Maybe,
I believe that comes after the fourth reoccurring guest. I don't know.
Jacket at least?
Yeah.
Is this like the Masters?
Dude,
You'll upgrade the silver after 4.
We'll get some gear out there, yeah. We'll get some gear. People be
Where's
on the lookout.
Merch?
That's on the way. It's on the way. It's in the works.
Nice.
We'll meditate on it first, and then we'll figure out what we can come up with.
We'll have above the line and below the line merch,
Yes. Yeah.